Wow, way better roll. Way better.
Like, love it. I'm like, ready?
Okay.
This is Haley.
And this is Bailey, and you're listening to Text Me When You Land. Every time Haley and I sit down to record a podcast, we say we're going to be so on it and get it done, and we talk for so long before.
We always chit chat right before and just catch up, even though it's like we talk all the time. It's not even like we don't
talk all
talk
the
for long
time.
times. We just like find things to talk about. That's what's great about long distance friendships, though, is that you can just always find things to talk about.
Yeah, seriously. I was thinking that. I did a story today, talking about our podcast, because I haven't storied in a while. Like, I'm sure some people don't know. Some people obviously know we have a podcast, but I was like, how cool is it that we get to sit down and do this every week? Because I feel like it ends up making us have conversations that we wouldn't normally have. And I feel like it really has helped us stay connected when we've been long distance friends, just because yeah, we do talk all the time, but it kind of makes us stop. Like, we wouldn't have really talked tonight if we didn't have to stop and sit down and have conversations that you're not just gonna randomly have if you're not sitting down to do a podcast, or it's gonna be
Oh, totally.
here and
It's
there.
like an audio scrapbook.
Yeah, we're gonna look back on this one day and be like, oh my gosh, we talked about so
I've
much
already
stuff
thought that
online.
about some of our first episodes. I'm like, wow.
Yeah,
I remember our very first
relaxed.
episode we ever recorded. Our first episode we ever recorded, we actually had to redo because we're like, that was bad. We can do better. So we actually, the very first episode we was our second take doing it.
It's true. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to sit down and talk about all this stuff and make it. We've said this before, but make it make sense, because as friends, me and you jump around in conversations so much, and we have so many deep conversations, but we're not sitting there trying to have the conversation where somebody else can follow and not just us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also the ADD. I think if people have ADD, they're probably more likely to follow along. But I think if you're just kind of listening just to listen, you're like, what is happening right now? It's like, I don't get it. It's like, yeah. So we've been really good though about staying consistent, I think. And I really like that we now do weekly episodes, and I think it's fun to see us grow.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. I definitely think one day we need to look back and listen to our first episodes. I think we'll both be like, oh my gosh, we've grown so much. But I was even thinking that I went through our text recently and looking at our first conversations versus now, it's we did not know each other. I mean, obviously, but
No,
it was just
it's
so
just like,
funny.
hi, how are you? Hey, question. Oh, now it's like, what was that? Just
Yeah.
really quick responses.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So something Haley and I feel like have been actually talking about a lot between ourselves and just going back and forth on is body image. And I think that's been such a conversation because of the world we're in. And I think maybe just the time of life we're in. Because I don't feel I know we've talked about it before, but I definitely feel like it's become so much more present recently. Because it was interesting because I had been thinking a lot about it. And then you texted me and you were like, hey, I've been thinking about this. And I was like, wait, really? Because I have too. And then we kind
What
of
did
got
I
into a
say that
conversation.
kind of inspired that?
I
Oh,
don't
it was about
remember.
different styles. I was talking about how
Oh, yeah.
there are so many different styles, and low-rise jeans don't work for every woman's body type. I'm like, just that's what started it, and we just kind of went off on a little tangent on it.
Yeah, we actually had really good conversation. I'm trying to think back because I was we just kind of both went on a rant, and I was we were like, wait, this would be a good podcast topic. And I think sometimes for me especially, I feel I'm a little more I'm it's kind of scary to talk about because I think it can come off wrong sometimes when you're just chatting back and forth. But I just want to disclaimer, that is when we're just talking about it, we're just talking about it from our experience and what we've gone through. And obviously everybody goes through things differently. But I think that's what sometimes I get nervous about when we sit down to do a podcast. Because when me and you are going back and forth, I'm like, hey, did that make sense? Even I'll be like, hey, I'm not trying to mean it in the wrong way. You're like, no, it didn't. But sometimes when you're really into a conversation and you're talking, you're not completely
It's very
finishing your
narrow.
thought. Yeah, and it's well, you're not
Yeah.
completely finishing your thought. So sometimes it's wait, did she mean it that way or that way? And you're really only talking from your own experience and what you've gone through, and everybody has gone through something so different in that. But I'm excited to talk about this today because I think it's been something we've been had a lot of thoughts on recently.
Well, I've noticed that a lot of people have been posting more and more about what their actual bodies look like throughout the month and even the week or even day. And I feel like there's so much pressure that a woman puts on herself. Like, I saw this thing that said the average time a woman looks at herself or takes a picture of herself compared to a man, like a woman in her lifetime will take over 1,000,000 photos of herself versus a man is only like 600.
Wow,
It's
that's
like
huge difference.
women I it's a huge difference. I don't know the exact numbers, but
Yeah, yeah.
it was something that big. Like, I know it was like over 1,000,000 photos a woman would take of herself versus what a man would be like, "Oh, hey, selfie," you know? And that's just average. I know that that's not no one size fits all kind of a thing. I thought it was interesting too because I'm like, women are always so much more critical of their bodies, but I think it's often comes from a lot about how we were brought up. Like, our environments we were in, I didn't realize how much my body image played a role from how my parents and my siblings all were growing up. And like my mom was always like trying new diets and doing all these new things like Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig. And I mean, that was just kind of a thing for I think our parents back in the day. Like that was a huge thing. Like my friends' parents did it. Like it was just what they did. And so it made me really self-aware, and then my dad was really aware of his body, but then also other women's clothing, and that made me really, like, hyper focused on it. And so it kinda just led into me being kind of more insecure at times, and then I saw this other thing that said, "Your the ideal distance a woman should look at herself in a mirror is 6 feet, because that's when you don't see all the little nitpicky imperfections that we tend to kind of hyper focus on, like zits or like the way our cheeks like lie on our face or the way our body like looks in a mirror. Like they say the ideal distance from a mirror is 6 feet away, so that way you're not constantly ripping yourself apart. And I was like, but why are we like that? Like why is there so much pressure to
I
look
think what's
so good?
I mean, I there's so many reasons I think. I mean, social media, one, like that's a huge thing and like what people are
Hmm.
posting. And we can dive into that because that's actually something me and you talked about. But also something you said was your parents and who you're surrounded by. And I think it goes further than that. It's not just your parents, it's who you end up with. It's who your friends are. It's really who you're surrounded by. And I think that's super interesting because I remember us having this conversation actually super early on when we became friends. And we had talked about like my parents have always just been like, it hasn't been I was trying to think when we had this conversation, but I don't remember, like, my parents doing diets or things like that, like, I just remember them, like, living a healthy, balanced lifestyle, and I feel like that's where I got that from, but that's just because that's what I was surrounded by, and of course, there were times when, like, you're not always completely balanced, and my mom did go through stuff when she was younger, so I think maybe she was so, like she knew what it was like to go through things like that, that she
She was breaking
focused
the
on not bring yeah.
generational issues.
Yeah, so I think that's super interesting, but that doesn't mean there aren't hard times or things, I remember being surrounded by friends that just always wanted to bring each other down, and I was like, you start to look at yourself and you're like, "Why are they, like, talking about me like that, or why are they saying that?" And it's like, no, you need to be surrounded by people that are bringing you up and supporting you. It's like Evan is always like, "Oh my gosh, you look so good," or, supporting me and, like, being like, "That looks great," not like, "Oh my gosh, don't wear that," like, "That looks not good," like and I hear people that are surrounded by people that talk to them like that, and when you're talked to like that, you're gonna start believing that, and that's what I think is, like, so hard, and I think that's comes to social media too, like, what you're seeing is these perfect pictures, and that's not how it looks from every angle.
No, it's true. And that's we talked about that. Like what you're seeing from someone like posing may not be how they look when they're at a standstill, like when they're just casually hanging out. Like for example, I'm really good like when I'm bloated, I'm really good at hiding my bloat. Why am I like that? I don't know, but I just know I'm really good at hiding it. Now, most some people be like, "What bloat?" But for me, because it's something I notice, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I got to cover that up." But I mean, I remember when we were together, in was it Florida? Yeah, we were in Florida and we went to the beach and I was like, this is my first time wearing a bikini on the beach. And because usually I'd wear one pieces. And it was just something that I never did really. I mean, I was always that friend that covered up. And, I never really had any reason to cover up other than, my family just didn't like the idea of two pieces. But I mean, to each their own. And so you were like, "Wait, really?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was so nervous. I don't know why, but it was just like, and then I went to the pool the other day with Bryce when we were down in San Diego. And I was wearing a bikini, but I was gonna wear a one piece, and I was like, "You know what? No, I'm not gonna be young forever. I'm not gonna look like this, and I'm gonna be so upset at myself in 10, 20, 30 years when I look back and be like, you looked gorgeous then. Like, why you were so insecure about something so small, like, why aren't you doing this? Rock it, own up to it now."
Okay, as you were talking, you probably saw me smiling, but I literally my reel I was gonna post tonight, posting tomorrow, is this audio is so fitting for what you're talking about. Okay, one sec. When you're older and your grandkids are like, "Oh, tell me about when you were younger," and you're like, "Oh, well, I didn't really do much because I was worried about what people thought of me. I didn't go running and jumping in the sea because I was worried about what my body looked like. I didn't even try to apply for the dream jobs because I didn't think I was good enough." You sound so silly. And as like when I
Yes!
listened to that, I was like,
Yes!
and then when you were talking, I was like, wait, this is so fitting. I'm literally in the caption gonna add this podcast so people can go listen to it.
Yes, it's true though, but, like, you're not gonna think about when you're in your 80s, 90s, 70s, even 60s, I think, you're not gonna be like, "Man, I wish I didn't wear that." You're gonna be like, "Wow, look at how less wrinkly I was." Like, you know, like, and wrinkles happen and life happens, you get older, and you know what? It is what it is, but I know that I don't want to regret the life I have now because I know it's not gonna last forever.
No, it's not. And it is so easy to be like, wow, today I feel girls' bodies are meant to change. And we
Oh,
literally
yes.
are meant to carry babies, and our body changes so much when that happens. And I feel like
Mhm.
literally the 4 weeks out of the month, I think we look so different. I saw a reel where it was like each phase, and it's like your body changes so much. I actually this morning looked at myself and I was like, oh, I look so different today because I just ended my period. Like, but it's if you're
Wait,
hard
me
on yours
too.
we're back synced. We're synced again. But it's hard. Like on those few days, it's like we went to the beach and I remember being like, at first I was like, wow, I don't feel 100% like I normally do. But then I was like, okay. And like I'm gonna go and I'm gonna enjoy because there's another trend going around. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a girl who does poems. And she was like, I've never gone to the pool and remembered what somebody's body looked like. And I was like, and I actually listened to her podcast on it. She was like, some people in the comments were like, I have, and like it was like a whole controversial thing. But honestly, I don't. Like, I don't go to a pool and I don't remember being like, oh my,
I think
like,
the people that do remember are those who have probably the most insecurities.
and I mean, it's hard. Like, but then we're getting all over the place. Is how we talk. But I was thinking about this the other day. There's so many different body types. Nobody's the same. And I was literally saying to you, I was like, I don't feel like I've looked at somebody and been like, that's what I want to look like. I've always been more based on like, oh, I've been working out, like, I feel really good about myself, like, I feel good, like, I'm happy, but I don't feel like I've looked at it and been like, "I look like this person, so now I'm happy," because I don't feel like,
Yeah,
that's
I
at
don't
least
think they
me,
go
that's
hand
just
in
my
hand.
like, that's how
I've
I've at
definitely looked
least
at a body and been like, "That would be goals," but I don't, like, envy it to the point where I deplete my own self-worth and my own body image. Like, I'd be like, "Oh, I wanna work hard so I can have, like, the toneness, so I can be more toned." Like, I take
motivation.
it's like yeah, it's like a motivation thing, not like a, "Oh, I," and if I find myself wanting to get to that, or if I'm getting to a point where I'm like, "I want that," like, if I start going down that path, I'll usually just remove that, like, thought or that person if I'm following on social media. I'll mute them for a little while, like Helen Owen, for example. Beautiful woman. She's gorgeous. She seems so nice. For a while, I was like, wow, I aspire to look like her. And I mean, not like in a way of like, I want to look like her, but I was like, I need to be fit. But then I realized I'm not my body type is not like her. Like, it's not even possible. And that was just hurting me more. And so I think that we also have to come to the realization of what is best for our own bodies is different for another person. And like I've put on some weight since I've had my endometriosis surgery. And last year I haven't been able to work out as much. But then I realized like that's okay. It's okay to have your weight fluctuate. And you know what? Your worth is not tied to the number on a scale. And I think that a lot of us have often put our worth on the way we look, and it's not. So, I wanna ask you, what do you do to try and help your confidence when you don't feel the best? Like, when you're, like,
Yeah, that's a
I don't
good
know whether you're in
question.
a swimsuit or not, or you're going out in public and you're like, "Oh, I just feel so, like, not good right now." Like, how do you work through that?
I think the biggest thing is like I really try to be like, do I want to remember this moment for not being happy because I don't feel confident? Or do I want to go and live in this moment and enjoy it? And I think sometimes like that sounds like so like, okay, like but you really have to like be able to process that and like think about it. And I like you said, we're not here forever. Like we only get these moments so many times. Like they're like we're in Europe and like we were going to the beach, and was I going to spend the whole day upset that I didn't feel the best, or was I going to go and have a great time with Evan and remember that day as like a day that we like really got to enjoy and relax. And like that's a day that like I look back and I'm like, "Oh my god, that day was so amazing." But easily I could have made myself not feel good and been hard on myself and then not been able to enjoy. And I know it's not always that simple, but I think that's something I've really learned. And it's not even just in like, it's in so many areas of life for me, but like travel has just made me like, I think put it into perspective a little more.
Yeah, I think that's a really healthy way of doing it too, because if we were to let those insecurities and those thoughts and those feelings when we feel down take control of our life, I mean, think about how much we'd miss out on.
Yeah.
If
And I
I at
think
least
for
if I did that, I mean, I would miss out on a lot.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to not, put that pressure on ourselves, but it's so important to be able to live in the moment. And I feel like for me, it's like if I can live by the 80-20 rule, and like I've talked about this so many times, but like that is huge to me. And if I'm going and I'm like, okay, today I'm gonna relax, like I'm not gonna stress that I didn't, like work out or I didn't do this. And I think that's been a huge thing for like me the last few little bit. Like I'm definitely probably not as balanced right now, but it's like, it's okay. Like I'm traveling, I'm having a great time, I'm soaking this up. And when I get home, we can get back on a routine. It doesn't mean I can never get back on a routine. Like
Well,
it's only
that's and here's what's really cool, because, like, this is kinda getting more specific. If you have exercised and have had an active lifestyle, which I think you have, I consider you fairly active. Um, when you take time off, for example, like a vacation, even a month or 2 months, 3 months even, I learned that it is easier for your body to bounce back from those because of the muscle memory that you get, and so what might have taken you longer when you first started, it probably takes longer because you still have to develop that muscle and that memory and that you adapt to the certain exercises. But then as opposed to taking time off, when you start getting back into the rhythm of it, it comes quicker, which is nice. So I mean, in the end, it's fine that you take time off, because I even like I read a quote that said if you gain weight or lose a little bit of endurance living a life that was completely normal or having a good time, maybe that was supposed to happen. Maybe that weight was supposed to be gained. Maybe that weight was supposed to be there. Or maybe that endurance was supposed to be lost so you could find it in another way. And I was like, that's a good point. Like, life is so throwing curveballs and just things happen. And you have to be able to go with the flow of it and learn to adapt. Otherwise, it's just going to drive you crazy, I think, in the end.
totally. I think too, like for me, it's been like, okay, like we've been super busy, we've been traveling, we're doing all this stuff. And I'm like, what is something I can add into my routine that's gonna make me feel more confident? It probably is not gonna change that much, but it's gonna make me feel more confident. I feel like it's been like I go on walks every day and I do like a little
That's a
workout
great
versus
one.
like something, like I didn't join a gym
Walking
here
is
because it just
awesome.
didn't fit into our
They have
schedule. It
gyms.
wasn't the right fit.
They have gyms there. I don't
Yeah,
know
we
why. I
just
feel like gym is an American thing.
no, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
they
know
do.
why.
They do, but I just feel like we never got into that routine here. Last year we
Yeah.
did, but this year we just didn't. And I was like, at first I did find myself making comments. And then Evan is the one that was like, Bailey, what are you doing? Like, don't talk to yourself like that. And like, that's what
Evan
I
is
mean by
so good
having,
about shutting that down.
and that's what I mean about having someone that's like supportive and like pushes you, because it's like, oh, you're right. Like, he's like,
Mhm.
he like, the second I say something, he's like, "No, like, don't talk to yourself like that." He's not mean about it, but he's just like, "What are you saying? Like, that's so
Yeah,
not
yeah,
true." And then I'm like,
yeah,
"Oh my gosh, you're right." Like, I'm being so hard on myself, and if I just keep talking to myself like that, I'm gonna start to believe it. Like, just like we talked about at the
yeah.
beginning of this episode.
You don't wanna get to a point where you're so in your head about your body that you think about it 24/7. Because 'cause I've been there. I mean, it's hard and it's life-sucking, and it's just an awful place. Like, for example, I was in a calorie deficit because I was trying to lose some weight, and I was eating probably 1,400 calories, which, I mean, I only burn about 1,800 calories a day, so it was pretty. You're supposed to do no more than 500 calories when you come to a calorie deficit. Anyway, but I found myself constantly thinking about food, feeling like I was starving, and my whole days were just filled of me just kind of being irritable, and I just was like just I in the back of my head, I was thinking, "Oh, this is all for a goal. This is gonna be for a goal, hard goal, like, I got this." And I realized it wasn't sustainable, and I wasn't the happiest, and I don't wanna constantly be thinking about it. So I upped it a little bit, and I found that, yeah, I might not be getting to my target goal or whatever of what I want as fast as I wanted, but I realized my goals have changed from rather than a weight to more of a look and a feeling, which has made me more in tune with myself and be able to enjoy life along the way, and that was so freeing. It's so freeing because you just I like food is such a bonding thing for me too, and I don't want it to be a punishment or a cheat. Like, it's just you wanna be able to still live life, and people just put so many stipulations on these celebration, like, food items. Say, "Oh, it says Friday, so it's cheat day," and I'm like, "I don't do that." Like you
Yeah.
said, 80/20, like, you just gotta
Yeah.
find the balance with it.
I love that because one, when you were talking about like a weight, like weight on the scale, it was interesting because I was like, I've never ever really like weighed myself and been like, oh, that's like a great, like, I'm like, I do not base it on like my weight. I'm like, I know what I'm always like kind of between, but I'm like, I rarely ever weigh myself. And it's really based on like me eating healthy, having a healthy lifestyle. And that's when I feel the best. But there are times like I literally texted you and I was like, during my last period, I was like, I've never been so hungry. And at first, I was like trying not to eat as much because I was like, I was like the hungriest I've ever been. I was like, what is happening? But then I was like, you know
Yeah,
what?
'cause
I'm just
didn't
gonna,
you tell me doesn't it isn't it usually you aren't
I
hungry on your
usually
period? I
am
think
not hungry. So I was like, this
yeah,
is
it's
super
that's not
weird.
normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also have been going to acupuncture. So I'm like, is my body like not as like aligned right now? Which was really interesting. But I was like, maybe we'll see. I was like, but during I was like, "You know what?" At first, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I shouldn't eat as much," and I kept making comments, and Evan was like, "If you're hungry, eat." So then I was like, "Okay." So I started eating, like, an actual good meal, and then I was like, "Oh, I'm not as hungry." Because I was trying to eat my normal, and that's just not what my body needed, and now I'm off my period, and I'm not as hungry, and I'm like, "Okay, like, it was a few days. It's not gonna make or break
You
it, but
don't
it feels like
you're not
it.
gonna
It feels
gain
like
a
it's
bunch
never
of
gonna
fat
end."
from eating yeah, for eating a few days worth of
I was
food.
literally
Like, I
so
had
hungry, though,
that's
it's
a
concerning.
really hard
It's
you
true.
know,
It's
that's hilarious, I think. I mean, yeah, you could be like, "Why can I not stop eating right now?" And then you just start, like, getting concerned. It's like, "Is this my new normal? Like, what if I'm always like this?" And it's like, you just have to take a deep breath and go slow, figuring out what you feel good about and just making sure it's not consuming your mind and your brain because I think at that point you're just becoming a prisoner in your own head and that is worse than I think any insecurity could ever bring when you're just constantly thinking about something perpetually to the point where you just can't enjoy your own surrounding or a moment like going to a movie and getting popcorn like there was points where I was just like oh can I have this can I have that can I have this and I was like no because I had to really prioritize because I was in such a deficit that I was like oh my gosh I can't do it anymore and trust me, it takes a learning curve and insecurities are never going to go away. It's kind of like I heard this thing that women are always going to battle having insecurities, but it's a matter of how they overcome them and work through those because the world is never going to change. Like there's always going to be some sort of new trend, whether if it's like eyebrows or fillers or Botox or, plastic surgeries or nose jobs. Like there's always going to be something and you just have to make sure that you're not doing it for the wrong reasons. And we talked about this when we did an episode about, plastic surgeries and fillers and why women are more prone to doing it. And I think, if you're curious about that, go listen to that episode too because it's pretty good. We talk a lot about similar things.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that when you were saying that, but I think it really comes down to like, of course, like I said, this is our experience, but loving yourself, find what makes you happy. And like, I feel like not comparing to others, because I think that's where a lot of things come from too. And surrounding yourself with people that are going to bring you up and push you to get, when there are those times you're thinking of those things, like they're going to push you to be like, don't think like that. Like, you look amazing, you look beautiful. And also, push you to find that good balance. Cause like I feel like there's some days Evan has to like be like, let's go to the gym, like let's work out. And then there's some days I'm pushing him. It's that balance. And I think if you can find a healthy balance, whatever it is, like the 80/20 rule, like that's literally I feel like what's gotten me to be confident in all these different phases because I'm like, okay, during this time, it's okay. It's okay to relax. And then during other times, like having that healthy balance is super important to me.
And making sure yeah, doing it because you want to do it, not because someone else is trying to make you feel a certain way.
Yeah,
Like
or bring you down. It can be vice versa of what I said too.
yeah, Exactly.